participants of today's webinar, dear students, invitees, and friends. Why is a webinar? Webinar is a process of group study that systematizes our knowledge, elaborates our thought, minimizes the topic, initiates our problems, alarms for solution, and above all, reconstructs our ideas. Friends, it is a process of self-evaluation with maximum information that affirms revolutionary changes in the humanity. It is a screening process of elocution to modulate our intuition that allows us to re-establish our rights in society. Friends, it separates some essential materials while introducing our ability to bring reformation on the earth. It is a system to execute our mono-action through various interpretations around us, and it also helps to recalculate our phenomena essential to build the human mind. It is a process of symbolical expression to reach millions through different inputs, amusement, and recreations. Friends, it is a process of selection through elimination of thoughts, and it mobilizes the initial thought that allows us to rejuvenate our mindset in a gradual process and presentation. It is a kind of social equation for mass movement that fights against injustice while bringing amazing renunciation in the human. It is a platform to stand against our emotional barriers, to put forth our demand on a middle path that very often gives an ironical solution and makes us action oriented while rebuilding the social setup. So, friends, let's accept the process, salute it, and spread it around and among us. Thank you. Now, I request one of our participants and presenter, Miss Simran Naik, to present her thoughts. Simran to present.
Respected chairpersons, our HOD Professor Kamakhi Prasad Das sir, seminar coordinator Minati Panigrahi madam, my seniors and my dear friends. Today in this webinar, I, Miss Simran Naik, would like to present an article prepared by our departmental HOD on status of women in ancient India. Status of women in the Vedic and the post-Vedic period. The Indian cultural tradition begins with the Vedas. It is generally believed that the Vedic period is spread over from 300 BC to 600 BC. Some general observations and broad generalization can only be made regarding the status of women during this vast period. Freedom enjoyed by women. The degree of freedom given to women to take part in public activities indicates that the women enjoyed their freedom during Vedic period. Women never observed prudha in Rig Vedic age. They enjoyed freedom in selecting their male partner. They became educated and widows were permitted to remarry. However, divorce was not permissible to them. Even men did not have the right to divorce their wives. Women were given complete freedom in family matters and were treated as ardhanginis. Equal educational opportunities for women. Daughters were never ill-treated, although male children were preferred to female children in Vedic period. They also received education like boys and went through the Brahmacharya discipline, including the Upanayana ritual. Women studied the Vedic literature like men, and some of them, like Lopamudra, Gargi, and Maitri, were the pioneers of composing the hymns of Rigveda. Lopamudra was the wife of Agastya Rishi. She composed 2 verses of Rigveda. Position of women in matters relating to marriage and family affairs. Marriage in the Vedic period was considered a social and religious duty. Women had the right to remain spinsters throughout their life. Marriage was not forcibly imposed on them, and child marriages were unknown. Girls were given in marriage only after puberty, that too after completing their education. Women had the right to select their life partners. Often there were also love marriages called Gandharva Vivah. Monogamy was the form of marriage during the Vedic period. Remarriage of widows was allowed. There are a number of references to custom of niyoga, where a brother or the nearest relative of a deceased husband could marry the widow with the permission of the elders. Niyoga was mostly practiced to obtain a child for continuing the family tradition. The practice of sati is nowhere mentioned in the Rigveda. The practice of taking dowry was there, but it was only symbolic. It had not emerged as a social evil. In family matters, though, the custom and tradition invested the husband with greater power in the management of the household. Still, in many respects, women were regarded as equal of their husbands. Both husband and wife were regarded as the joint heads of the household. The wife was obedient to her husband, helping him in the performance of his duties, including the religious ones. Economic production and occupational freedom. Women had economic freedom in Vedic age. Some women were engaged in teaching work. Home was the place of production. Spinning and weaving of clothes were done at home. Women was helped their husbands in agricultural pursuits. Property rights and inheritance. Women's rights were very much limited in inheriting property. In Rigvedic age, unmarried daughter had full legal rights in the property of her father in the absence of any son, and each unmarried daughter was entitled to 1/4 share of patrimony received by her brothers. Mother's property after her death was equally divided among her sons and unmarried daughters. In the Rigvedic age, the married woman had no share in father's property, and as a wife, a woman had no direct share in her husband's property. However, a forsaken wife was entitled to 1/3 of her husband's wealth. A widow was expected to lead an ascetic life and had no share in her husband's property. Thus, it could be generalized that the social situation was not in favor of women possessing property, and yet protection was given to them as daughters and wives. Role in the religious field. In the religious field, wife enjoyed full rights and regularly participated in religious ceremonies with her husband. Religious ceremonies and sacrifice were performed jointly by the husband and the wife. Women even participated actively in religious discourses. Role of women in public life. During the Vedic period, women participated in the philosophical debates. They usually occupied a prominent place in social gatherings, but they were denied to enter into the sabhas because these places, besides being used for taking political decisions, and also used for gambling, drinking, and such other purposes. Women's participation in public meetings and debates, however, becomes less and less common in later Vedic period. It may thus be concluded that in Vedic India, women did not enjoy an inferior status, rather they occupied an honorable place. Status of women during the epic period. The women of epic India enjoyed an honorable position at home. Both Ramayana and Mahabharata epics had given a respectable place for women. Women had been called the root of dharma and prosperity in both the epics. We find vast reference of the expression of courage, strong willpower, and valor of women like Kaikeyi, Sita, Rukmati, Satyabhama, Savitri, Draupadi, and others. The Ramayana is a glorious illustration for the Hindu ideal womanhood. It glorifies the value of Pativrata and idealizes womanhood as one of the most venerable aspects of our heritage. The Mahabharata also outlines the duties and the attitude of the wife to the husband. Hence, epic age is considered as a golden age for the woman. Women during the period of Dharmasastras and Puranas. During the period of Dharmasastras and Puranas, the status of women gradually declined and underwent a major change. The girls were deprived of formal education. Daughters were regarded as second-class citizens. Freedom of women was curtailed. Sons were given more weightage than daughters. Girls were prevented from learning the Vedas and becoming brahmacharinis. Manu, the lawgiver of Indian society, gave the statement that women have to be under father during childhood, under her husband during youth, and under her son during old age. At no stage shall she deserve freedom. However, he balanced this with the statement that a society in which the woman was not honored would be condemned to damnation. Due to the various restrictions on the freedom of women, some problems started creeping in the social field. Pre-puberty marriage came to be practiced, widow remarriage was prohibited, husband was given the status of God for a woman, education was totally denied to women, custom of sati became increasingly prevalent, Prudha system came into vogue and practice of polygamy came to be tolerated. In the economic field, a woman was totally denied a share in her husband's property by maintaining that a wife and a slave cannot own property. In the religious field, she was forbidden to offer sacrifice and the prayers, practice penance, and undertake pilgrimage. Factors that caused the degradation of women. Prabhati Mukherjee, the renowned sociologist, has identified some reasons for the low status of women in post-Vedic period. These reasons are imposition of Brahminical austerities on the entire society, rigid restrictions imposed by the caste system and the joint family system, lack of educational facilities for women, introduction of the non-Aryan wife into the Aryan household, and foreign invasion. Women in the Buddhist period. The status of women improved a little during the Buddhist period, though there was no tremendous change. Buddha preached social equality and he tried to improve the cultural, educational, and religious status of women. During the benevolent rule of the famous Buddhist kings such as Chandragupta Maurya, Asoka, Sri Harsha, and others, women regained a part of their lost freedom and status due to the relatively broad-minded Buddhist philosophy. Women were not only confined to domestic work but also they started educational career. In the religious field, women came to occupy a distinctly superior place. Women were permitted to become sannyasis. Women had their sangha called the Bhikkhuni Sangha. The sangha opened to them avenues of cultural activities and social service. Their political and economic status, however, remained unchanged. Status of women in the medieval India. The medieval period was from 500 AD to 1500 AD. In this period, Muslim invasion of India changed the direction of Indian history. As far as a woman was concerned, her freedom was curtailed. Knowledge of not only the scriptures but even letters was denied to her and her status was reduced. Caste laws dominated the entire social life. Widow remarriage and levy rates were disallowed. Women could not inherit property. Girls were treated more as burdens or liabilities than as assets. The women faced many problems such as child marriage, Prudha system, practice of sati, etc. However, during 14th and 15th centuries, the social situation had undergone some change. Ramanujacharya organized the first Bhakti movement during this period, which introduced new trends in the social and the religious life of women in India. The great saints like Chaitanya, Nanak, Kabir, and others fought for the rights of women to religious worship. they secured certain social freedom and the Prudha system was abolished. Women could go out of their families to attend pravachans, kirtans, bhajans and so on. The system Grihastram of Bhakti movement did not permit saints to take to sannyas without the consent of wife. This condition gave some important right to women. The saints of the Bhakti movement encouraged women to read religious books and to educate themselves. Thus, the Bhakti movement gave a new life to women, but this movement did not bring any change in the economic structure of the society, and hence women continued to hold low status in the society. The revival of sati, the prohibition of remarriage, the spread of prudha, and the greater prevalence of polygamy made her position very bad. Thus, there was a vast gap between the status of women in the early Vedic period and that in the medieval period. Comparison between present women and ancient women. Women in Vedic age were respected and had freedom to choose to lead a family life. This is the golden period for women in India. There were dual thoughts in Smriti's age. At certain place, they talked in the praise of women and at other against their freedom. Women were given proper education and freedom during epic age, and the status of women was same as in the Vedic era. During Buddhist age, female education was encouraged. It was possible that women could become missionaries and they could remain unmarried. Medieval period is the darkest in the history of Indian women in general. Exploitation of women in the form of early marriage, female infanticide and forced widowhood etc. With independence, the Constitution of India has brought women on par with men by eliminating sex discrimination. Education to all women and changed the status of women. Education and employment among the women is encouraged. Present situation is that most of the women are having job outside the house, which leads to dual responsibilities. We saw that how slowly the role of Indian women in the society changed. Thank you.